Who's struggling more now in America? Is it white people or is it black people? Who's averagely engrossed in debt more, suffering more?
Black people are generally suffering
Black
more
people.
economically in
So if
America.
you want to take a look at that again and just have a look and just do some research, I think you find it isn't.
Where are you
I mean, like failing in school and stuff. It's the white people that are going down. It's the white population.
In the United States?
I don't know about in the United States.
Why did you say that then? You know that's not true.
I'm about in England. But you don't know about them, do you? Sorting a 5,000,
You think I don't know about Palestinian terror attacks?
So why'd you justify
the second
it? So
I didn't.
Do
you think I just wait? Why do you think I was justifying Palestinian terror attacks?
Did
you watch my channel?
No. Is this LonerBox?
Yeah.
Right, so let's get down to this. What's your stance on Israel and Palestine?
Like the entire thing, or what we were talking about in the chat?
The entire thing. Like, who do you think the Palestinians are? How long you think they've been there, and if they truly have a right to be there?
If they truly have a right to be there.
Yeah.
Well, I think by the point of the British Mandate around 1917 or throughout to 48, yeah, it seemed like there were quite a lot of Arabs living there. About 700,000 of them, for various reasons, quite unsavory, got fucked off over to the West Bank, to Gaza, and the rest of them out to Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt. So, and I think the people living there now have a right to be there. I think the refugees have, and their descendants have some right to either reparations or some kind of restitution. And I think the people living there in the West Bank and Gaza now have a right to self-determination, because that's generally what we do with people who live in a certain area.
So what I would say to you is, where can we start? In, say, there were settlements, right? There were settlements there when the Ottoman Empire got taken it. Well, England took it. Well, the world order, whatever, League of Nations, whatever the 1920s, like, it was like a UN kind of thing, gave it to England, right? And England gave it back to the Jews, right? So we have to negate where these people came from. So if we go to in Islam, it would call it Palestine, right?
It was called Palestine, I think, originally by the Romans, and then
the Romans called it Philistine, right? Philistina was the original. They renamed it from Israel to Philistina to it's like as an insult to Jews to rename it, try and wipe out the.
That's not the first time it was ever called Palestina. Like Herodotus was calling it Palestine like 500 years before that, but yeah.
But I think you're conflating like the Philistines with the Philistines were wiped out long ago.
Okay. So
if we use that, they're not Palestinians, and then we have to understand when obviously it's been taken over time and time again, right? You could admit that, right?
Like just about every part of the world, yeah.
Right, but it's been constantly been taken over more than any other land, right?
I don't know if it's more than every other land. Maybe more because it's more recent.
So let's look at evidence.
How many times have the sort of areas between Poland and Germany and Eastern Europe? How many times have they switched hands? You know, I'm not making a point about like what ethnic group can trace its lineage. That's not the argument I'm making. Is that when the British were there in 1917, the majority of the people living there were, I guess now we refer to them as Palestinians, but they were Arabs, right? There was like at least 80+% or 85 or 90% of them. So that's what I'm talking about. And we call them now Palestinians, but those are so when we talk about Palestinians, we're referring to the people who were already there when the British took over in the majority.
Yeah. So if we use that terminology, right, we know the indigenous population that would have you call Palestine wouldn't have been Arabs. No way would they have been Arabs, right? So we could assume they're not the original people there. Now we have to look like where they come from because when the Nakba happened and so on and so forth, the expulsion, a lot of they all left. They all left to like Lebanon and tried to overthrow Lebanon 3 times with the PLO. And then it was just refugees from there flooding in, and it's
I
so
think that's a slightly
complicated.
simplified narrative, but okay. I feel like most of the refugees from the 48 war went to Gaza and the West Bank. The rest of them went to Lebanon, Syria, Jordan.
There was really none there at a point in time.
But the
Majority of them
point
left.
is, the people living there, why are you saying they were not Arabs? When Britain took over the territory, the people living there were called Arabs, right? Most of the people living there were Arabs.
Yeah, yeah. I'm on about the indigenous,
What do you mean indigenous?
the original people that lived there would have not been Arabs.
Well, the very original people would have been the Canaanites. But I mean,
Oh,
are we
well,
gonna return it to them, or
well, way before that, there's Sumerians. It could go so far back, but we
do you
know.
think like the Native Americans should own all of the United States?
But do they know?
No, why not? Do they
It's
have a
just the
right
way
to
it
kick
is.
out? Do they have a right to kick out like European descended Americans to reclaim their indigenous land?
So, right, it's a two-sided coin, right?
I think it's a very
Right.
simple
If
question,
say,
but
well, no, because there's two ways to look at it. Industrialization and colonization builds infrastructure, builds systems, right? And if there wasn't there, what would be there? It'd just be empty land. So it's the harsh reality of the world, but we can't change facts,
well, that
no
would mean
matter
that
how bad.
the Arabs and the Muslims who came to Palestine, to that region, would have a right to it because they did. They built cities. They built infrastructure and they built institutions. Yeah,
Didn't the Romans before them?
yeah.
Didn't the Jews before them?
What point are you trying to make? Are you trying to do you think what do you think like the events of 500 or 1,000 years ago determine what we should how we should judge the human rights of people who are alive now?
On facts, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think Jews had a right to kick out Arabs from historic Palestine in
But
1948?
they haven't. You forget to mention or
They
forget
did.
to negate that I
They
think
went
there's
to their
about
villages, told them to fuck off, and then
there's
blew up
about
their
what I
houses.
think there's 1 million Muslims that live in Israel, Arab Muslims.
Yeah. So
So
some of them
why?
were
So
kicked out, other ones
then the
weren't.
question becomes, why are these ever Arab, Muslim Arabs negated because they voted in for Hamas, which is a terrorist organization? They voted them in 2005.
Okay, so I'm just going to stick to one point rather than I don't know why we jumped onto from 1948 to Hamas. Do you think the Jews who kicked out Arabs from their homes and their villages in 1948 had a right to do that or
Yeah.
not?
Like this is the analogy I would use. If you went, say something happened to you and you had an emergency and you left, and then you come back and someone's living in your home, what would you do?
What if I left my house for what like a day and came back and someone else was living there? I'd be quite annoyed.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't
So
like
you
that.
would, yeah?
Yeah. Are you going to make
So
that? Are
then,
you
of
going to act as if that argument extends across generations
course
for
it
like
does.
1,000 years? So
Think it should.
if I like leave my home to go to France and then I have a kid and then that kid has a kid and that kid has a kid and that kid has a kid and that kid has a kid, then my descendant from 1,000 years gets to come back up here to where I live now in merry old Aberdeen, and they can kick out whoever is renting the place now.
So
So can a Pict?
it's a
I think it was.
two-sided.
I think it might have been Picts, or I don't know if it was Picts or Celts, but
LonerBox, you
can
smarmy
like
fuck
I'm sure
bastard.
someone was thrown off the land that I live on right now at some point because feudal wars and shit. Can someone really from 1,000+ years ago just come back and throw me out because they were living here before my family was?
As I said, it's a.
It's a yes or no question.
I think they can if it's their land.
How do you decide who's How do you decide who owns the land?
Because historical evidence shows who was there.
And we have, okay, so can Native Americans, would it be okay for them to kick out all the European Americans because it was their land first?
Oh, yeah, if they truly, really and truly, the moral thing would be yeah.
So where did 300 million European descended Americans go?
That's the struggle back to Europe.
Have you ever looked into your descendancy?
Yeah, I know a lot about Europe ascendancy.
Uh, are you sure? Because you sound like you're from England, right?
So I was born, yeah, I was born there,
Do you
yeah.
know how many
So
different
the
factions in
Anglo-Saxons,
England? Yeah. Do you know how
Vikings,
many
yeah,
different
Romans, yeah, of
Normans?
course I do.
Do you know how many different factions threw each other off of their land in over the last few thousand years in the UK? I don't really
But
know
we could,
why. Why should we have to rearrange everything back to
but
how
that's a
things were
left-wing argument
2,000
because
years
you're saying,
ago?
well, the
That's
English
not a
aren't really
left
the
wing. Well,
English, right?
that's not my argument. My argument
That's a
is
left-wing argument because then we could say, well, if we truly know history, we could trace English DNA, right? So the earliest DNA, which would be Gaelic and Celtic, which if we test Wales, which we know historically, the Romans pushed the original English people up into the valleys of Wales and Scotland. So we know there's a specific gene pool that's still English there. So
yeah, and then we had Norwegians, and
again,
then
we
we have
could,
people of French descent. We have people with Norman descent. Again, I don't know
of
why.
course,
Why are we? But why do we want to return history to this specific period? To like who was on this plot of land the very first? I don't know why you would do that. Technically, a lot of us can just measure our descendancy all the way back to North Africa. Why can't we just go there and reclaim like pieces of Libya and shit?
I know what you're saying, mate.
It's just not a very good
It's
ethical
very,
system. I know you can say, like you said, to conceal, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not left-wing.
No, I know, but you kept saying it's a left wing argument. But I think when you're saying that, it's because you know it doesn't really have any logical or ethical foundation, right? It's an insane standard.
In the UK, a lot of left-wing debaters would say, "Well, English aren't really English. That's the
Well, I
left-wing."
don't care about them. Like, you can find one of them if you want to, but I'm asking you, why,
LonerBox,
because of what
you
happened 2,000
smarmy
years ago,
cuck bastard.
should people get punished for crimes that were committed by other people from 1,000 or 2,000 years ago? Why was it okay to remove Arabs from that land when they were not the ones who kicked Jews out
Do you
at the time
believe
of
in
the Romans?
repatriations, Theo?
Sorry?
Do you believe in repatriations? Do you believe in that ideology?
Repatriation?
Yeah.
Uh, I, it depends on how I feel like you're going to define it in a very different way.
So,
What do you
like,
think is repatriation? What's like a good,
compensation
yeah?
for something that's happened to someone in the past. Do you believe in that? Like, i.e., slave tradery.
To a degree, I think after a certain amount of time passes, you get to a stage where it's just impossible to figure out exactly who owes who
So,
what.
would you be against or in favor of paying, like this American governor said that they want to pay black people compensation for their ancestors' slavery? Do you accept that?
The
Do you
only
agree with
way that
that?
you could ever action that is if you find out if people are actually owed something across generations. Like if there was people who were offered if there people were
But do you agree
promised.
with that?
Again, I'm answering your question. If people can be offered something like when people back in the day were offered 4 acres and a mule or whatever the fuck, and then you could just go back and see if you can actually trace that lineage, but that's like a government thing. And the problem with slavery is that like those black people who are descended from slaves still live in America. But generally, I think when it comes to black American issues, I think there are better solutions than reparations. So
So you don't agree with reparations?
I think depending on how you would action it, I don't know. I haven't seen the most
But
convincing way to do
it's a
it.
yes or no. Like you said to me, it's a yes or no. Just say yeah or no.
Yeah, sure. There's a version of it that I would accept.
So
Yeah.
by your ideology now, Israel's in the right to do what they want because they suffered for thousands of years, torment, suffer, murder, slaughter, Holocaust. So by your own
Did the
default and
Palestinians do
ideology,
that?
yeah, of course the Arabs did it.
The Holocaust.
What do you understand? One of the Palestinian
I
leaders
thought you said
met
it was
up
the
with
Romans
Hitler
who did it.
and went to live with Hitler. Did you know that?
Yeah, I thought you said it was the Romans who kicked out the Jews from historic Palestine, though.
It's been loads of times. It's been like I said to you, it's been conquered
Also, slavery
Loads
wasn't
of
that
time.
long ago. We're talking about thousands of years ago versus a couple of hundred.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. So now time does matter.
Of course, time matters. That's why there's no
Why
movement of
does it? Why?
Picts.
Hang on.
That's why there's no
So
movement
why is
of
something
Picts
different
trying
a
to.
thousand years ago
That's
to a
why
hundred
there's no
years ago?
movement of Picts and Gaels trying to reclaim their ancestral land by evicting people who live in the UK now. Yeah, of course, time matters. What are you talking about?
See, that's you've just undone yourself there because you said when I said to you, well, about patriations, if someone's had like was a slave owner like 500 years ago, they should be repatriated, right? So time, if time was important, it should be there and then, and that's it, right? So by default, you
Do you think there's
have
a
to take
binary
up
between there and then and 1,000 or 2,000 years?
yeah, because how could you?
Why not a
What
few
would be
decades?
the
Why not
basis
like
of
a
your
couple of
claim?
100 years? Why? I think if something's traceable, it matters a lot more. But that's not reparation. Wait, sorry. Do you think reparations and repatriation are the same thing?
Reparations. So I meant like compensation, basically, like the payment for. That's what I
Yeah.
was
So
saying.
is there any do you think reparations involves punishing white Americans for the slave trade?
In a sense,
How
in
many
a
white
sense,
people
it
are
is.
gonna How many white people are gonna get evicted from their homes in a reparations program today?
How many white people are going to suffer if that money's handed out and coming from white communities? You have to look at the bigger picture.
It's
So
coming
don't
from
look
the
at it from one view.
taxpayers. It's a taxpayer thing. Yeah.
Who's struggling more now in America? Is it white people or is it black people? Who's averagely engrossing debt more, suffering more?
Black people are generally suffering
Black
more
people.
economically
So
in
if
America.
you want to take a look at that again and just have a look and just do some research, I think you find it isn't.
Where are you getting
I
that
mean, like
idea from?
failing in school and stuff. It's the white people that are going down. It's the white
In
population.
the
Like, you
United
know,
States?
I don't know about in the United States.
Why did you say that then? You know that's not
I'm
true.
I'm on about in England.
I thought we were talking about reparations for the slave trade.
Yeah, but
That's
it's
an
these
American
notions. What I'm
discussion.
trying to get at is these. If we
Oh
hear
my
something, we
God.
accept it.
Okay.
We believe first. Like Palestine,
Yeah.
right? What do you these people that you say, well, every time Israel's tried to make peace with them, they've not accepted it. They've not accepted it. They've actually ordered the assassination of one of their own leaders.
So if you want to ping pong around your arguments, we still haven't figured out the first one about 1948. Okay, you're a good old Englishman, right? Merry old England, English
Yeah.
liberalism and the the Enlightenment and all that shit. Do you think it's ethical to punish people for crimes that they didn't commit?
No, it's not.
So why should Jewish people who are descended from people who lost their homes over 1,000 years ago get to throw out Palestinians who did not commit those crimes?
So it wasn't right. So I accept now these on the West Bank, these pop-up
Not talking about
things.
the West
I
Bank. I'm
accept them
talking
all.
about Israel proper in 1948 when people were thrown out of their homes by Jewish militias
So
and Jewish military.
did you know? Do you know the peace agreement and what Israel offered them? How much land they
Do
offered
you
them?
think do you think that was justified to throw them off their land for crimes that they
But if you
didn't commit?
right, so this is
Yes or
the
no?
answer, right?
Yes or no?
Yeah, because it's
I'm
not. It
playing your
doesn't cut.
game.
You're taking a sequence of events out.
Yes
You're
or
taking
no,
a
Sonny?
sequence of events out. But see, you would have to say, well, why did they? Why is it they kept moving
I'm
on
sorry.
and
That's a
having
very
to do it?
long
So
yes or no.
yeah, because they offered them land
I'm
more
waiting for the
than
yes
what
or
they
the
would have ever
no.
had. 86% of land they offered them, and they refused it.
86% of the Peel Commission?
So
The
they
one that
had
was rejected by
Judea,
the Zionists as well?
Sumeria,
The one
Judea, and Sumeria. They offered them, right?
your timeline
So
is a little
and they
bit
refused it
your timeline is way, way off.
because I'm in conjunction. I'm just trying
We're
to
talking about
get it all
1948.
in a crumb.
I don't know why I can't get a concession off you from this one, or just an answer. You don't even need to concede. I just want an answer for this one specific thing. In 1948, was it ethical or not for Jewish militias to evict Arabs from their homes and to blow up their houses? Was that ethical or not?
No, if that's
Wow,
the
thank God.
correct, if that's the correct facts, if
But I
they're
thought you said they
correct
were
facts, you
reclaiming
take.
their land that they'd lost to the Romans or some
So
shit.
let's look at this what you're saying. So let's take a look at these events. What was the date they did this?
48.
1948, you're saying what?
When Jewish militias went to Arab villages and threw them out and blew up their houses.
Right. So let's have that. Did they have a special event? Because usually when this happens, or certain historical things, they usually call it things, right? So what would that be? Called?
Some people call it the 48 Israeli-Arab War. Some people call it the Nakba. Some people call it the Israeli War of Independence. One of those. It's got quite a few names.
So you're talking about the Nakba, the expulsion.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the Palestine War, right? You're referring to?
I don't know if it's ever been called the Palestine War, but sure.
So here we go. The goal of the Arabs was initially to block the partition resolution and prevent the establishment of the Jewish state. The Jews, on the other hand, hoped to gain control over the territory allotted under them under the partition plan. So they're saying basically, well, we've been given this land, we want to build on some of it, right? But the Arabs are saying, well, you're not having none of it.
So the Arabs who were thrown out of their villages after that decision, did they were they the ones who rejected the partition plan? Did they vote on that? Did they?
Then you'd have to look at the government, wouldn't you?
What was the? Can you describe the
someone's
Palestinian
at
government
fault.
of 1948?
Did they not make a council? Was there not Arab leaders representing them
Were they democratically elected?
from Kuwait? No.
Were they elected? Were they democratically elected? Did the villagers choose them?
So what you're saying is
some of those villagers had peace pacts with the Jews, like Deir Yassin, and they were massacred. So
is Dubai democratic? Is Dubai democratic? Is Afghan democratic? Is Iraq democratic?
No, it's not. Kuwait, but that's why. Why do you wait? I just want to see that your brain is like functioning properly. Why did I ask you that question? Why did I ask you if the Palestinian leaders were democratically elected in 48?
Because you're saying they didn't accept it. It wasn't like they was voted in. Now their culture and their way of life is totally different to ours.
So I'm asking you why should the people who lived in those villages get punished for the decisions of their unelected leaders?
That's to ask them. You should be asking their leaders. You should be asking.
I'm asking you what you think is ethical.
I said to you, if the governments give it to them, let's give it to them. If they're claiming their land and they've taken it, they've taken it. It's what it is.
Yeah, I know that's you just described what happens. That's exactly what happens when someone takes someone else's house. Yeah, that's true. But do you think it's ethical or not? I think you just said it's not. So, but now it seems like you're trying to walk it back to say that the Arabs deserved it because they rejected the partition plan. But no, where are we now?
I'm saying it's not ethical. I never said it's ethical to steal from someone. No, it's not. But
do you consider it stealing? Jews taking those villages over and evicting the people who lived there. Do you think that was?
What do you mean?
So you do think it was unethical for Israel to throw those people off their houses, off their land, right?
I believe they should live together. I don't believe in a two-state thing. I think they should have all mixed together. But because the Muslims believe in something else, and if you knew what the Muslims read, so in the Quran it says, "Every Jew behind a tree we shall kill." So how can they live together when you believe ideologies like that?
Do you think that? Do you think they again? Some of these villagers had peace pacts with the Zionists.
How do you know this? How do you verify it?
From reading the history. How you verify anything in history? How are you verifying everything you've told me?
You look at books and you research, right?
Yeah, that's what I did. Yeah, yeah.
And where did you find that?
It's from a book called "The Birth of the Palestinian Refugee Problem" by Benny Morris.
So someone that accepts the idea of Palestine. So there you go. So it's not easy to distinguish.
What do you mean accept the idea of Palestine? What does that mean?
So if you accept, because Palestine never existed, there was never no controlled state. No one ever governed Palestine.
It was called. It was called. First of all, Benny Morris is quite pro-Israel, actually. So I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, believing in the idea of Palestine. It was called Mandatory Palestine when it was run by the Brits. So
why was it called that? Because it was what its name was at the time.
So what's that? So that's the idea of Palestine. What's wrong with? Wait, What do you know about Benny Morris? Was it just because the title of the book is The Birth of the Palestinian Refugee Problem?
Well, yeah, because
That's what they are, though.
the rest. What do you mean? They're not Palestinians.
They are. What do you think Palestinian is?
A real Palestinian got wiped out in the Bible, but it's in biblical history. It was never a nation. There was
Palestinian
never a
is just a.
city.
You know, Palestinian is just a. It's like a national identity, right? It's a national identity for people who lived in historic Palestine or can be descended from historic Palestine.
But there is no historic Palestine. I've just told you that.
I'm just referring. What land on earth do you think I'm referring to when I say historic Palestine? Do you think I'm referring to like France, Algeria, or
We know what you're referring to, but it's not historic.
That's the word for it. That's what we call it. Yeah, we call it historic. It's called historic Palestine. That's the name of the land.
It should be called historic Israel because that's the original name.
It wasn't. Do you think the first thing it was ever called was Israel?
Well, that's what we know it as.
That's not what we know it as. The name got changed.
That's what you did.
Okay.
What do you mean? Let's go to the Torah and see when God gave this land and said what it'd be called.
Are we consulting the Torah? Is that why?
So
do you think we should name every country the first thing it was ever called in like the book?
So you're saying it's the right to wipe out a culture, wipe out a civilization?
Wasn't part. I'm not saying to wipe out any culture. Was it not called the land of Canaan for a while? Like.
So that's the whole area. So it was Sumeria as well, and so on and so forth. So no, that was a bigger area.
So do you think we should rename every region back to those those old names from the past? Should we bring back the land of Canaan as well?
So what's the name been of England and America for as long as this existed? Was it not Britannia? So it's essentially the same name, but it's just changed translations, right? Because of like you said, the migration, the colonialism, right? But it's always remained the same name.
I don't really know what Native Americans were calling the area. I'm sure within the United States there were plenty of areas that had different names.
Different names, yeah, of course.
So should we bring those names back for the towns, or is it only for countries?
Is there not some? Is there not some that have Indian names in America?
Yeah, but
is there not names
some
in America
other ones were changed, right? Like I don't think Virginia or like parts of Virginia were always called Virginia, right? I don't know.
No.
Okay.
We both have our points, but it's about facts. Like we do know the Jews were there first, right? You accept that, right?
Sure.
You have to accept facts, right? So we know it's there. So we know who was there first. So we know what the name of it was.
Although I think Canaanites were there for whatever.
Yeah, the Canaanites would have, but we don't know what they would have called it unless we look at the Canaanite pantheology. When I've studied a little bit of it, which our actual God derives from the original God pantheon, which is not neither here nor there. But then we have.
But you already told me you don't believe in the idea of original inhabitants of a land having a right to reclaim it after they've been away from that land for over 1,000 years, right? That's why you don't. That's why I imagine in your heart of hearts you don't actually support deporting and evicting all the European descended Americans from the United States. Do you think Arizona should go back to Mexico?
So the Sumerian cultures, what we call them Semitic cultures, were all linked together. Were all related.
What did I just say? Sorry, what did I just say?
You said, well, I don't truly support the idea of Europeans being deported from America. I don't really.
Yeah.
If you look at the culture, we're related to Sumerians. We're all the same.
So what does that have to do with Jewish people having the right to evict Palestinians from their homes and villages over 1,000 years later?
They're not the indigenous population.
Okay, Arabs.
And
why does that give them, so why does any of what you're saying, I'll ask you one more time, why does any of what you're saying give Jewish people the right to evict Arabs from their villages?
Because they've not even been there 100 years. They've not even truly been there like 60 years, 70 years.
Where do you think they were descended from? Who do you think their where do you think their
They are
grandparents lived?
Lebanese and Jordanian refugees.
Do you think wait, do you think that land of I guess you want to call it the land of Israel for the sake of your argument. Do you think that land was empty 100 years ago?
It wasn't. There was hardly anybody. Like there were settlements, but there wasn't. The population was in Gaza now. There was nowhere near that. It was a small. We even have.
Gaza City
There's
is
a book
like
from Jeff
ancient.
Hoffman.
Jaffa is
Jeff
pretty
Hoffman
old.
does a
Yeah, a lot of these
documentary
cities are
where it
really
shows
old.
the land. It shows what Israel was, and it shows how many actually houses was in there before the Jewish settlements, and there's hardly any. So please don't say there was thousands and hundreds of thousands of people. That's a lie. It's a
It's not
lie.
about
When
there
we know
being
they fled.
wait. In 1918, there were about 60,000 Jews and 600,000 non-Jews.
Yeah.
So
But who's the, hang on, who's the ever non-Jews? Does that mean they're all Muslims, Arabs, or does it mean they're Christians?
they were
So Christians could be from
they
Jewish
were
descent, which
do you
would
think
be
okay,
Israeli.
do you think they were mostly Arabs or Christians in 1918 in historic Palestine?
It depends, because some of the original
They were
indigenous
mostly
people
Muslims.
of the
Stop.
state,
Why are you being so difficult? Like, you know, they were
yeah,
mostly
actually,
Muslims.
yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that,
Okay.
but I'm on about the lineage, the not the faith.
Oh, you want to know who their granddaddies were and who their granddaddies were, like that kind of thing.
Don't you think it's more important to find out? Like you're saying, well, there's more Muslims there. Well, of course, because of the Ottoman Empire. We know that.
Yeah, but that's why I don't really like. I don't know why you think it's so important to find out exactly who they were like 1,000+ years ago. I don't know why that's so important to you.
Well, find out who they were 70 years ago, which I said they're not even the
Well, the
indigenous.
Ottoman Empire
The
took over that
indigenous
place in
people
like the 15 or 1600s, so they were Muslim for quite a
yeah,
while over there. Yeah, and then
yeah,
Muhammad
yeah,
conquered the place. So yeah, before that, like, I mean, there were
yeah.
crusades there. The Crusaders were there for a little bit,
But
but
that's what they say. But Muhammad didn't really truly go there because the things he says in the Quran are not there, and the things that he's so we could say we know for a fact he wasn't there. Um, these are things. If you look at the Quran, surahs, the hadiths, you would see it. But what does Allah say? I'm the greatest of all deceivers. God doesn't say that.
again, it's not really relevant to what we're talking about.
It is. It's, you could break down narrative stereotypes with facts and understand that. But I'm not saying Arabs can't live there. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying it's the reason why the Gazans are segregated is because their ideology. There's Muslims that live in Israel. There's Arab Muslims that live in Israel. Work that
I
out.
don't really know if ideology is the only reason Gaza is segregated, right? Like, might be because the population of Gaza was what 60 or 80,000 in 1948, and then the year after it was up to 200,000+ because it was full of refugees who had been pushed out from historic Palestine. Sorry, historic Israel, right? That's probably why it got the way it was in recent history. But you think, I don't know, I think you think that's unethical, though, to kick people out of their homes for crimes they didn't commit? I think that's where we
But
are, right?
they was growing on the land. It was not even they was kicking. At first, they was just building on settlements, but the settlements
That
expanded.
wasn't
It
all
wasn't
they were
kicking
doing.
them
They were
further.
also buying land
That's
from
more
foreign
of a
landowners.
recent.
They were also
That's more
buying land from foreign landowners and evicting the tenant farmers. They were doing that as well.
yeah, in some cases, and that's I don't agree with that, but I
I
can't
thought,
do anything about it.
I'm not saying you can't do anything about it. We're asking you what's ethical. But it seemed to be that you spent half of this conversation trying to wiggle really hard about it actually belonging to the Jews because of what happened 1,000 years ago and them being there. But now it seems to be that you actually think it's unethical because even though Jews can trace their lineage quite far back to the land of historic Palestine, that doesn't give them the right to come back now and evict people who currently live there. It seems to be
If
that's
they
where you're
own the
at.
land, well, no. So if you again, let's use an analogy. If you own a car, leave it somewhere, and someone makes it their property, would you still want that car back?
But there's, again, those property rights, and when it comes to a nation, when it comes to land, don't translate for over 1,000 years. So that's not what they did.
What? So time is important. So time does
Yeah, time's
make a
really,
difference.
yeah, I think time's actually quite important. Yeah.
And what scale? What time would you justify? We'll say, well, it's too long. What would make and what would be the principles of you saying, well, that's too long ago?
When it comes to nations,
Yeah.
For refugees, I imagine it's like if they're still alive. When it comes to nations, I feel like, well, nations usually, when they draw their borders up and they get internationally recognized, I think regardless of how unethical it is, once they're internationally recognized by enough of the world's major superpowers, they kind of just have to exist as they are. And then the best you can offer to people who are suffered from it, or maybe reparations or restitution or something like that, right?
So see,
But I
but
don't
that's
know
a
why I
bit
would
wrong,
ever
isn't it?
apply
How is that
personal
just? How is
property
that
to
just?
make an analogy to nations and borders.
How
That's
is
just a
it
really
just?
strange thing to
How
do.
is that just though? How is that morally right? A
What?
crime's a crime. If a crime's been committed, no matter what time's gone past, you should always pay for the crime, right?
Well, not if the people who committed the crime are dead, unless you can directly show how the benefits of that crime might be going across. Like, I don't know.
Me personally,
At what point do you think the borders of Europe were just? Because they've changed like a million times in the last 1,000 years. Like,
I accept that. I think we should. The problem I think what we should have done, if we wanted to go back there, we should have cohabited. But even when we did cohabit, the day they went to sign a peace treaty, they slaughtered hundreds of Jews, which I'm forgetting all these things. So
wait, what day? Which event are you
they
talking
hang
about?
on. I think it was 1970 something. Hang on. I'll try and find it is. Try and find it. I think it was 1993. Rabin Arafat increased expansive for self-Palestine rule on the West Bank, and then
Mm-hmm.
it caused
I think the first, and then what?
the Oslo. Yeah,
You're referring to like a major terror attack after 93?
yeah.
Like when that Jewish guy went into a mosque or a place of worship in Hebron and murdered 30 people and like threw grenades into the fucking place where people were praying. Is that what you're
See
talking
how you
about?
pick though. So see, this is but you don't point out
Or when
9/11. You
Rabin
don't
was
point out 9/11.
assassinated, or like I don't,
Yeah, but see, it's
by
easy
people
to
who didn't
call one
want
out. But
peace.
then look at all the evidence. Look at let's have a look at all the. Let's Google this. So, so look at all these terrorist attacks that you don't even hear of.
What?
1993, 300 Israelis were slaughtered. 2005, 1,100 Israelis were slaughtered, and that's just modern ones.
Okay.
But you don't know about them, do you? Sorting of
You think I
1,100
don't know
Jews.
about Palestinian terror attacks?
So why'd you justify
The
it?
second
So
I
you
didn't,
claim
I didn't.
Palestinian.
Do you think I
Did you
wait?
say
Why did you think
Palestinian?
why do you think I was justifying Palestinian terror attacks? Do
Did
you
you just say
watch my
Palestinian
channel?
terror attack? No,
As in
no, I've
terror
only just
attacks
seen it.
committed by Palestinians? Yeah.
So Palestinians are what then? If Palestinians have caused terror attacks,
Oh, we're going back to that. What are they? Like, because you don't think they're like a real thing?
yeah, but if Palestinians are people and they're causing terror attacks, wouldn't you segregate yourself away from them, like you just said?
But that would also be an argument to segregate from Jews because they've been committing terror attacks since the 40s.
Yeah, but they haven't. When right?
Really?
So
The
tell me
bombing. Who
right,
did
yes,
the
right.
bombing of the King David Hotel?
But we could go back and forth.
Can
We
you
could
tell me
go
what
back
dec? Can
and
you
forth.
tell me what decade that happened in? Can
I wouldn't know.
you tell me what century that happened in?
The King David Hotel?
Yeah, bombing of the King David Hotel.
No. Recent, probably. I don't know. Well,
Okay, so
not
why don't
recent.
tell me I don't know about fucking terror attacks? Okay, sorry, I'm done. Bye bye. Jesus Christ, fuck me. What a waste of time. Okay.